Hello. Hi, Janelle. I'm glad you could make it. Hi. I'm getting a little. I've set it up so that I can wirelessly do things, but the thing is that it keeps dropping out, and then I have to. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, so it's not working. So it's just some way in the configuration that's not quite working. Hang on, let me just look at the sound monitor. Should be okay. I haven't had a chance to watch back the sound on the other one. If it's bad, then, whatever. But I also drop frames, and there's a few, again, once you move and do different things and whatever, it just, problems beget problems. You know how it is. See, I'm out of sync again. Fuck's sake. See, I don't know what, I think maybe this is not a workable, maybe I need to pull out the SLR, and maybe the iPhone is not the setup that I want. Maybe I do need the HD capture. Maybe I do need a capture card instead. Maybe there's a reason why people do that, Taya. Maybe you don't have all the answers. All right, hang on. Let me just turn the preview off and see if that helps. It may not. If I'm out of sync, then I apologize. Let me just stop sharing for a minute, and that might, because I might just be putting too much pressure on things. Anyway, so hello, Janelle. It's good to see you. I didn't really, again, I don't really have, like, I hate doing titles for these things because, we have a more organic sort of, slightly more organic, and I'm like, what do I want to talk about today? And then I move on and I'm bored about what I want to talk about today. But, I think that, because I have actually done some of the, I think, how long ago was it? God, I don't know what, it was like, fucking, could be 2 weeks ago, could be 2 years ago, I don't know anymore. But I did a thing about this, the idea of, like, whether anonymity online was a, like, feasible way forward. And I started to, argue that maybe it's something that you needed to trade off, right? And then, as usual, like, Republicans in the United States turn around, take a discussion and turn it into something wholly detached from the intention, which was good faith, and it goes until it just turned it into something authoritarian. Why not? Why not just make it so that everyone has to? So again, there's a difference between having a conversation about, okay, well, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe there's, again, there's no easy solutions to complex problems. There's not one solution. One decision creates, there's always unintended consequences and all that sort of stuff. But, so it is worth having a conversation about how feasible anonymity is, what that looks like, who administers it, like all of those sorts of things, right? And at the end of the day, this does actually feed into conversations about like nudges. Like, how I've talked about nudges before. The reason why like this idea of nudges sort of exists, right? And it's called, okay, so I've talked about choice architecture before, right? So what choice architecture is, that's what like user experience design is ultimately kind of a form of choice architecture, policy, this, it's all design thinking really at the end of the day. But like in choice architecture, you've got this, it's where, the idea of nudges, I think I focus a lot on the unethical side of nudging, but you've got the more ethical side of nudging, which is, if you want to promote certain behaviors in people or you put certain incentives in place, right, you will get certain outcomes or behaviors, or try to, because a government can't actually, the difference between, I suppose, an authoritarian government and a democratic government is that it makes like, it's the way you do things. It's not whether it's the way you approach the problem. It is the way, whether you give people agency or not, whether it is people's own idea. Okay, so okay, the CPU is a little, sorry. That's okay, it's fine. Let me just warm up again. I'm actually freezing cold. My hands are freezing cold. And it's a little bit distracting for my neuropathy, but that's all right. So, so the thing about like nudges, right? So nudges are basically, things that you being sort of pushed into making certain decisions, right? Whether, they can be small or large, or, basically like the discipline of choice architecture, if you zoom out, or design thinking or anything like that. What they're trying to do is, if you make you want X behavior, okay, so in marketing, that would be, they want you to buy their product. They want you to sign up to their email list. They want you to do, various things. They want you to click. They want you to interact. They want you to do that stuff, right? So in user experience design, you would create a number of different acceptable choices that you want the users to make, okay? Which is, you don't want them to leave. You want to create it so that they choose between subscribing or like giving you money, or, wanting more information, or, outright buying. You want to just sort of, contain and limit the number of choices that people have, right? That obviously is not a benign thing, because obviously when you're talking about things like government and you're talking about neoliberalism, where, in the United States politically, you're seeing this narrowing of choice, okay? That is a form of choice architecture, where it's like, well, you can have this job that fucks you in the ass with strawberry lube, and this job that fucks you in the ass with like blueberry lube. It's the illusion of choice, right? And so you want to be careful around, how you design those so that people feel they've got a choice. Like, so I wasn't planning to go into choice architecture, but let's talk about, so basically think about how you parent like a 3 or 4 year old, right? They don't have the developmental ability to have all of the choices. So if you give a toddler the choice between broccoli and chocolate, they're going to choose the chocolate, okay? Unless your kid's fucking weird. And nobody believes you, food blogging Susan, that your children prefer broccoli. Stop saying it. No, they don't. Stop lying, okay? parents with young children, right, engage in choice architecture. So you go, okay, well, you can have an apple or you can have a pear or you can have cheese. Obviously, that's not every choice that is available to that child, right? But what you do is, because you want them to make a healthy choice, you give them only healthy options to choose from so that they don't push back and they don't feel the need to they still feel like they've got some agency. And so obviously, as a kid gets older, you give them more complex choices and all that sort of stuff. But at the ideal, in an ideal world, a parent would narrow those choices for a toddler, expand those options for, in line with like their level of development. So as they become a teenager, and in an ideal world, with all things being equal, that process, you would gradually expand and prepare them for the real world where they're met with lots and lots of choices. And you would hope that you are trying to guide your child into, making more sensible choices, right? Giving them a moral framework, giving them all those sorts of things. So that's like the most rudimentary version of choice architecture, is when you want someone to eat healthy, you give them only healthy options. That's like at school, right? With the canteen lunches and junk food and all that sort of stuff. The same thing. You limit their choices so that they make better decisions, right? So, so that's like I can't even remember why I was going to talk about this. It was about anonymity, right? Can't remember. Oh, what was I can't even remember why I went into choice architecture to begin with. Oh, well, anyway. But you've got like the way that nudges work. Oh, sorry. So from a policy point of view, from a government. So the difference between an authoritarian government and, a democratic one. Like, democratic government is not just let you do this is the fucking libertarian, idiot bro, where it's like, well, nothing that I am not beholden to anyone. I am not, I'm just going to eat all the chocolate that I want. Fuck everyone else. Fuck that, that sort of, that attitude, right? That's like the idiotic form of like American, libertarianism. It's like, they're a toddler, right? You can't tell me what to do. I want to eat lollies all day. Okay. That's how I see like right-wing libertarians in the US. You can't tell me I can't eat chocolate. If I want to eat chocolate till I die and I hold my breath, like that, it feels very childish, right? But the role of government in an ideal world, okay, even in a democracy, right? The role of government is to create the conditions where you are you have maximum freedom, okay, to make choices. Obviously, those choices, you have as many choices as possible, so as many potential, freedoms as possible, but also acknowledging the fact that you've got to protect the vulnerable, you've got to keep the economy stable, you've got to run things, you got to get stuff done, you've got to, there's externalities and other various big things, right? You got to manage things. And you can't have everyone, it's just not workable to let everyone eat chocolate all day, okay? Because most people will just fuck around. So anyway, so in an ideal world, a government would give you the choice. Oh, that's right, I was talking about it. Okay, so anonymity, all right. So in an ideal world, this is how, even under a democracy, right, a lot of the way that I think that this... these nuanced differences where, in the United States, this thing where this phenomenon where everything has been narrowed and commodified, from, politics to the government to, the brands you can buy to the food you can eat. It's all just letterboxed and squeezed in so far that you are now in an inherently authoritarian state where you don't really have actual, I think they've sort of minimizing your choice, right? That's what commodification is, right? Now, I'm not sure if I've got coherent ideas here. I'm linking things on the fly. But in a democracy, you'd have a choice architecture, right? The discipline of choice architecture is how do you design society in this instance, or design things in a way where people have maximum amount of freedoms while still balancing that with, the fact that you still need people to make good choices. You need to, encourage and deter certain behaviors, and have positive incentives and disincentives across the way to encourage a certain policy, a certain outcome, right? And that's where it becomes grey, and that's where it becomes complex, because there's a lot of toddlers out there. There's a lot of toddlers out there who go, I want to go to bed when I want, and I want to eat chocolate all day, and I want to, have a punch up. Right. But you go, okay, well, no, we need to, but then they're not going to listen. Those people, I think they're not serious. They have a toddler brain. Okay. Then you've got normal people who are sort of go, okay, well, I understand that I trade off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to outsource parts of that thinking. Okay. So the problem with the anarchist viewpoint in general is that, and also even just the anarcho-socialist, the sort of anti-state sort of communism, is the idea that it's a lot of work to keep going. People need to, it's a lot of work. Okay? It's a constant negotiation. People don't want a direct democracy. Okay, generally, because people have shit to do. People want to outsource some of this stuff, outsource this thinking to people who actually know better or might be interested in it. Okay, so they can have more leisure time or whatever. People, democracy, is, again, there's lots of different versions of democracy, right? But liberal democracy is roughly where we've settled on, aside from the toddlers and the people who are who are annoying and just whatever, right? Most normal people have sort of settled on a liberal democracy, right? Now, what that means, there can be authoritarian parts of that, and more sort of more libertarian versions of that, but it's really about trying how much choice people have, how much autonomy people have, and how much you're willing to trade off in terms of freedom in order to, trade off for convenience and that sort of stuff, right? And that's where we find ourselves with social media, is that we've traded all of these, traded our privacy for various for convenience and the frictionless stuff. Right? Anyway, that's unrelated. But that's why when you're talking about a concept, right, you're just talking about a concept such as asking a question, is internet anonymity viable? Okay, that's why you'll see there's an authoritarian version of that and a libertarian version of that. Okay, so a lot of it is, and this is why people sort of can fall into these far right sort of, these authoritarian ideas, because they confuse and conflate the idea with the intentions behind it, or the outcome, right? I talked about this in the last stream, I think, which is that, hi, Stephen, which is that this is a really good example of that, which is that, I had a stream through a few months ago, right, where I said, I think it warrants a conversation about whether internet anonymity, and I mean okay, so let me define that. So I'm talking about the very large online platforms, Twitter, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the large platforms, right? That maybe anonymity is not viable on those platforms. Okay. Again, the devil's in the details. What are you talking about? Are you talking about the VLOPs? Are you talking about every website on the internet? I'm not necessarily comfortable. I'd be comfortable with, if you want to be on these public spaces, then you need to be, who you say you are. I've never been anonymous. I've never felt any need to do so. If anything, I'm a good canary in the mine for, what is acceptable and not acceptable in public. And trust me, it's pretty fucking grim at the moment. But at the same time, again, I think it's a valuable conversation, because I think that as someone who's never really felt the need to be anonymous, okay, thankfully that's a privilege. Again, that's a privileged position to take. It was mostly naive, because I didn't think that I would ever do anything that really was unacceptable to anybody, but it turns out that that's not the case, because obviously, there's a whole corporate. Now we're at a point where you've effectively got that social score where everything that you tweet, say, think, write in your real name is sitting in a data bank somewhere where an idiotic HR rep can sit around and give you decide whether to hire you or not based on your, like that's just routine. Like these AI tools will just instantly screen you out if you've got a shitty social score. They won't even talk to you. They won't even get through the gate. That's partially why I don't even bother applying for roles, right? Because I just know. And it's like, well, okay. So, so, there is that, which is that it's probably not in your best interest to not be anonymous. But it was, again, like I said, it was pretty stupid of me. But, like I said, I lean into it. I haven't done anything. If anything, me just being me, if that's a problem, then that's more of a sort of, that's a sign of a bigger problem if I'm limited the way that I am. And I find that deeply concerning, that somebody as sort of benign as me can be so algo fucked and so, anyway, so that's a whole thing. But so again, we can have that conversation about whether anonymity is a good idea, because we do have the problem of bots, fake accounts, astroturfing, all of those sorts of things that I've talked about before. Like those are real problems. But also, how then do you protect journalists? How do you protect people who are wanting anonymity for whatever reason, domestic violence victims. She hadn't even thought about like the details of that, which is that a lot of people disappear like online when they because for a matter of safety. It's not even about like your employers or the government or anything. It's literally a matter of safety, right? It's also a matter of like that I just don't want my I don't want my family on my, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of different reasons why people might want to stay anonymous. Like, even now, like, my family are so confused. Like, they just don't get, like, I don't use Facebook the way they do. I don't use Facebook the way that, like, for connecting and gossiping and stuff. I use it as a broadcast channel. So don't put stuff on Facebook and expect me to see it. I don't see it. I don't use it. The only thing that I really browse is LinkedIn and X. And even then, I don't really browse them much because I'm too busy creating. Again, this is old school sort of social media. This is like basic social media stuff, right? Which is that there are different ways that people interact and use platforms. And I'm very much in the creator camp. I don't lurk. I'm not someone who just passively reads. I don't generally engage too much unless, I'm sort of a little bit bored or wanted to be a bit, I'm in a shit posting mood or whatever. Or everything that I do has a creative aspect to it. It is always about the creative process. But then there are people who use social media as like a tool to consume media, which I don't do. Unless, obviously, I've shown you how I consume news and stuff like that. But, some people use it to consume. Some people use it just as a tool. So some people use it just to, measure sentiment or research or whatever. Like I do a bit of that. Others sort of, there's lots of different reasons why people use social platforms and how they interact, and often anyway, there's all these that's just 101. Like the fact that people don't understand this stuff, and it's been like IP like for decades. Some of it I think I created in parallel to a lot of the original people who did it, right? And if not stolen from me or whatever, again, you can't track these things. But this stuff is pretty common knowledge to anyone who knows anything about the internet, which is that, the reasons why people hit like or react a certain way on LinkedIn or, the way that they use certain interactions, it's not one way. Like people who let's say one example is people who write long threads, Twitter threads. There's people who think that they write long Twitter threads when they're upset or depressed or angry, or they tweet a lot when they're angry or whatever. And it's like, well, just because you do things like that doesn't mean that that's how someone else sees it. Other people have a healthy relationship with social media and again, it depends on how you interact. Okay. So, like a classic example of that is this morning, where I just took, this dude on my fucking X feed did the whole thing that they usually do, and I took a moment to go, okay, well, here's an example of like how to behave better, and here's an example, fellas, for anyone who's thinking of, behaving in this way. Here we go. You're right, and it's just a bit of fun for me. Like, it's a very detached thing for me. I don't get upset, right? It's not something that I do, and if I sound upset, it's because I'm playing a role where I'm a little bit, because it's like performative. You've kind of got to do, it's a polemical kind of thing, right? And people, just because you can't control yourself on social media, and just because you kind of, have impulse control and anger problems, or you're depressed or whatever, doesn't mean everyone is. Some people play with that. I play with that stuff. I don't go on social media when I'm not in the right mindset, because it makes it worse. There's no point. So anyway, but when it comes to anonymity, right? Again, I play with these things and I test these things and I try different ways of talking about things. And, it's very much an experimental, live out loud, work out loud kind of process for me. And I do that with my real name, again, on purpose, because I like to see, like, being that sort of crash test dummy and canary in the mine, and see what the response is and all that sort of stuff. But, the fact that, like, I'm, thankfully I can be self-employed, like, and I can, if I really want to, I can take on clients. I don't like taking on clients, but, I can. Mostly because they expand to fill the space that they're in. So when you have a client, it doesn't matter what they pay you. It just merely being on the books, it takes all your time, right? But, so I try to limit that. But, but when you're talking about like an employer and your real name and your sort of your digital footprint and all that sort of stuff, I think people have like very much the right to be concerned about that. And, it's, I mean, I've just assumed I couldn't get a job anyway, even if I wanted to, because my name, I'd have to change my name. Like, I think that's, because I think that it is just so habitual to just look at your social media. It's like, well, they think it's their right, and they think it's their God-given right. I think that will change. I think at some point, if it will become illegal to do that, but I'll talk about that in a minute, about the right to privacy. We don't actually have a right to privacy here, like the United States does. Okay, and so, but the conversations are happening. We don't have. Okay, let me qualify it. We don't have a constitutional right to privacy, okay? It comes up every few years that we should have a Bill of Rights. We should have a Bill of Rights. We should have a Bill of Rights. But, we do actually we kind of have various conventions and high court decisions and all these things that kind of enshrine that. So if it's tested in the courts, it's likely to be the case that we've got the right to privacy, right? We've got the Privacy Act. You get what I'm saying. So statutes and all those things, we've still got some of it. Okay, we just don't have a constitutional right to privacy. And there are gaps in the Privacy Act around data, specifically because it's international in nature, first of all, and because a lot of it is around intellectual property. And, like, again, a lot of this stuff is sort of evolving over time. Okay. So I think that we are oriented in the right direction, and it obviously goes to show that someone like Nikki Haley, right, your constitution doesn't necessarily protect you from a politician with that policy, right? They can, if that's the way, the way that she views the world and thinks that everyone should be, and is justifying sort of cracking down on anonymity online, that speaks to a worldview where they will find a way if they believe that that's their right. I believe that most, leaders and government, I think most people in the United States justify it depending on how they, which issue you're talking about. Okay, I think we've seen that now play out. I talked about this quite a bit, about this whole righteousness thing where, you know, it's not an across the board thing. They just want to censor the people that they don't like. They want to unmask the people that are being mean to them. And that's not really necessarily about the principle or the right to privacy or the right to anonymity, right? And I do find it fucking hilarious because, like, literally the founding fathers used anonymity, right, of the United States. It's just fucking hilarious. Like, people wrote under pseudonyms. Like, writing under pseudonyms is like the thing that formed the liberal democracy. Now, I would argue they don't have. I mean, most of the founding fathers were like left of centre anyway, right? By today's standards, they would have been considered, you know, social democrats, right? Because the way that liberty and freedom has been so distorted, again, choice architecture over a period of time, you've got a limited range of ideologies, right? It's pretty funny, actually. It's like it's socialism or capitalism, and we can't define either of those because it's all just neoliberal, like this thin slice of possible options. It's like, you do know that John Maynard Keynes is a thing. You do know that, like, there's other options that are not like communism or capitalism, and you don't even know what either of those are. But, you know, it's just fucking hilarious to me because that is a classic example of authoritarian choice, like this is death cult architecture. Okay, so cults will use choice architecture, like in the form of like thought reform, milieu control, right? In cults, in brainwashing, where they go, okay, this is the narrow, extremely narrow version of like events, of history, of language and behaviors, and this is, and anything outside of this very narrow choice, you're free to leave anytime. You're free within this narrow parameter, okay? But outside of that, you're punished, you're a bigot, you're fucking unpersoned, you know, harassed, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so that choice architecture is a sort of in degrees, right? So like I said, with a toddler, trying to get them to eat broccoli, you don't give them chocolate as an option, okay? That, again, you know, but in a cult, you narrow, or you know, you're giving people a lot less restrictive, and that's where that's a more authoritarian version, right? So when I talk about unethical nudges, I'm also talking about, you know, I don't want to discount the fact that there are ethical ways to architect and design society that are democratic, and you know, we're kind of trying to find those trade-offs, and that's what I find really interesting, because with this anonymity thing, is that this is like I said, I have expressed concerns about whether anonymity online is viable in the current landscape. And if we can't deal with bots, it's one of those things where you've either got to have a lot of false positives, okay, or you have a real name policy, or you you know, you have a free-for-all, like, dog shit experience, right? From a product point, that's been a problem on the internet since the beginning, is you don't know who's who. You know, people aren't necessarily, you know, cyber criminals and phishing and all those sorts of, you know, that's and with AI, that's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And so it is worth having that conversation. But then again, it stops at, okay, well, who stores that data? Okay, who's in charge of it? How transparent is it? How secure is it? Okay, is it open for abuse? Right? I don't want the United States government surveilling me. Sorry. I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan. And like, it is funny though, because with this Nikki Haley thing, actually, I've got a clip. Let's just watch the Hill thing. I think the Hill was actually the best thing for this. Let me just, hang on. Oh, wrong mouse. Hang on. Enable the preview. Let me just switch. Is it coming up? No, it's not. Hang on. Give me a sec. There we go. Okay.
Nikki Haley wants to abolish anonymity on the internet, a stance that was winning her absolutely zero support from conservatives. That's right. The 2024 GOP presidential candidate recently said that social media platforms should be forced to verify users' identities in order to protect national security. Let's listen.
When I get into office, the first thing we have to do, social media accounts, social media companies, they have to show America their algorithms. Let us see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second thing is every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots. And then you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say.
Accountability.
And they know their pastor and their family member is going to see it. It's going to help our kids, and it's going to help our country.
All right, so we're going to get some civility if people are using their real names, right? Because that's what this is about. She was like, someone was mean to me on Twitter and they were anonymous. Therefore, let's just do all of this. But you can see how it's like she hits all the notes, right? With bots. Oh, Russian bot. Okay, I agree with that. Russian bots, Chinese bots. Okay, what about Australians? What about those other people? What about Russian citizens? What about Chinese citizens? What about people who aren't bots? Okay, again, it's fucking hilarious to see this Russian bot bullshit come out. It's like, yes, that's called, it's like, that's it's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, but then it was just like, okay, so let's go again. Oh, wrong mouse again.
The Net was quick to react, blasting the former South Carolina governor for what many argued was blatantly unconstitutional. Haley's GOP primary opponent, Ron DeSantis, posted on X, "You know who were anonymous writers back in the day? Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James."
Do you know who? You know you've gone too authoritarian when Ron DeSantis.
Madison, when they wrote the Federalist Papers. They were not national security threats, nor are the many conservative Americans across the country who exercise their constitutional right to voice their opinions without fear of being harassed or canceled by the school they go to or the company they work for.
Not one to miss a chance to hit Haley. Presidential hopeful Vivek Ramaswamy made a similar point. Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison wrote the Federalist Papers under pseudonyms. Here's what they would say to Nikki Haley if they were alive. Get your heels off my neck and go back to England.
All right. Friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, also claimed the move would be unconstitutional, posting, "Is Nikki Haley aware that the Federalist Papers were written by founding fathers using pseudonyms? Nikki Haley may be one of the most warmongering and authoritarian candidates for president in some time."
Participants is a well-known Twitter X account, Comfortably Smug, and she was saying, she's like, and he's like, so I would have to put my name? And she's like, well, you could say Comfortably Smug after your name, and they kind of chuckle about it, but it's clear that, I mean, there are conservatives who use this, there's leftists, there's all sorts of people. Sometimes it's because people have something important to say, but would risk their job or maybe even their safety in order to say it, and we absolutely want to protect that.
Which is something that Ron DeSantis should know, because I gotta say, this is a nice statement that he made, but it is dramatically out of step with his own actions in Florida. As again, Glenn Greenwald pointed out, he's quoting FIRE, which is the free speech outlet that you also quote a lot. As FIRE notes, he says the University of Florida administrators are still violating the Constitution by telling banned groups that they can still exist only if they sign a vow denouncing Hamas. Creepy requirements to affirm or denounce beliefs also violate the First Amendment. Obviously. So I don't really know where Ron DeSantis gets off criticizing Nikki Haley when he has proudly announced that he wants to go to war against campus groups in his own state.
Vivek has criticized DeSantis for that as well, and has criticized them both. And just in case anyone thinks she was quoted out of context there, because it's an we don't see the question that's asked, we don't see the end. Byron York, who's a correspondent for the Washington Examiner, did asked the campaign about this, and she said, I'll read the statement, "We all know that America's enemies use anonymous bots to spread anti-American lies and sow chaos and division. Nikki believes social media companies need to do a better job of verifying users so we can crack down on those things." So that was not a gaffe. That was not quoted out of context. That is a policy view of Nikki Haley. I believe she said it would be the second most urgent thing for her to do when she took office. Very much out of step with free speech principles, civil liberties principles, obviously getting that kind of criticism. But also, I should just point out of step with, I think, where the energy is on the right, the online right in particular, absolutely values anonymity and shows that, in the fact, I mean, there was no faction that supported her on this. I couldn't find a single person saying, this sounds good.
One sec. There was the thing where she walked it back, right? Hang on. Sorry, unfortunately, handoff stopped working. It just works erratically, so I have to do everything manually while I'm doing it. Sorry about that. But it's like, well, no one would disagree necessarily with the problem, right? And it's like, I found it funny because I sat there and I was like, oh, fuck. I had good points to make with the last stream about like a conversation about verification and anonymity and whether it was viable and, in the current place where bots and all that sort of stuff, like that's my area, right? But to see it like come, I find it hilarious how it's always somehow about this constant thing where apparently conservatives are censored on social media. It's like, no, hate speech is. It's like, fucking hell. But it is interesting because in America, but the whole discourse around it is always like, oh yeah, Americans. America is the center of the universe. No one else fucking matters. Fuck everyone else. It's like, but China and Russia. You do know that there's 160 other countries in the world that might object to this. It's like, you do know that, you fucking hell. It's ridiculous. Anyway, but the thing about this is that, like, one of the reason that I've been wondering about, like, talking about verification, the way that I advocate for verification is, like I said, through incentives. So for me, it's not about, and this, I think this is the difference between, say, that's right. That's why I was talking about choice architecture, which was that it's about the difference between something that is a democratic policy solution and an authoritarian policy solution is that, and obviously there's degrees in the middle where, stealth authoritarianism and fuckery and, all that sort of stuff that you're seeing, like with, the stuff I talked about in the last stream about like manipulating that system, right? But like, it's not, it's not never binary with complex issues. But the difference between something that is democratic and pro-freedom and all that sort of stuff, right, is and authoritarian is that it's like, well, no, you must do this. This is the rule in all cases. We have declared this. Versus, okay, we're creating we're going to create and architect a way that incentivizes people to make better decisions and make better choices, right? So the way that I approach things is that I try to encourage pro-social behavior by, rewarding and not rewarding and punishing and, it's sort of, again, it's based in psychology, which is that punishment doesn't really act as much of a deterrent as positive reinforcement. Yeah, positive reinforcement, right? So positive reinforcement and, but positive punishment doesn't generally work, right? Now, it's like, it's more of it's you got to create the right incentives for people to do the right things, and they generally will. And that's why when I talk about, creating conditions where people will make better choices, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so it all links to each other, which is that the way that you Nikki Haley's solution, right? Apparent solution, this is, I think this is what people need to get right, is the way that they think about issues, okay? So is the policy solution that I'm proposing, or the product solution that I'm proposing, is it first of all, black and white 1-0 kind of top-down thing where it's like, you must comply with this law. It's like, well, no. The best way to do these things, okay, is to design things that respect people's autonomy, respect people's privacy, respect people's rights, okay, maximum amounts of rights, with rewards and incentives to do the right thing. And I think that this is, and again, when you're dealing with sort of the childish people, right, the childish people who are like, no, anyone doing any kind of policy or having any kind of rules or any kind of like rewards or punishments or anything or disincentives is authoritarian. It's like, well, that's really like quite dumb and childish, because it's like, well, no, we're doing it so that you'll eat broccoli and we're giving you a healthier range of choices based on the evidence, rather than the other alternative is to go dictatorial and just say, okay, well, you get what I'm saying? So that, sorry, I wandered, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say, which is that I think I needed to be clear, because this is what I see going. What I see is people taking issues on face value and thinking that these people agree with you on the issue, but they definitely disagree with you on how to fix that issue or their approach or their solution, right? So for me, I go, well, is internet anonymity a problem? Well, no one's going to disagree with that, okay? No one's going to disagree with the idea that people being subjected to bots and abuse and propaganda and platform manipulation is a problem. No one disagrees with the problem. This is what I was saying before about how, like anyone can sit there talking about the fact that there's a fucking problem and why won't we fix the problem and why won't anyone fix the fucking problem? Problem. Okay, we know what the problems are. Okay. What we're talking about is, how do you do things in a democratic way? How do you create solutions in a democratic way, okay, without limiting freedoms and respecting speech? It's like, well, okay, so you want to eat all the chocolate you want, but you don't want to get diabetes. Well, the world doesn't work that way. You're going to get diabetes. And if you're someone who is so immature and if you're like not able to, if you're somehow vulnerable or stupid or fucking aren't making good decisions, then you do need some form of intervention, because you are not making good choices. Now, again, we're talking about a grey area and who decides what good choices are. Okay, who decides what the good lifestyle is? I would say, well, let's use alcohol as an example, right? Perfectly legal, but as the child of someone who drank themselves to death, I wouldn't necessarily say that you should say, well, it's his right to fucking drink himself to death. Right? Because it affects other people. It affects, it affects society, again, all those sorts of things, right? So you need to intervene somehow. But the question is how you do that. Do you do that with a light touch? Okay. And this is where, like when we're talking about Australia, we're talking about like, even though we might not technically have a First Amendment or a right to privacy or all those sorts of things, we do have a flexible system in the sense that we can just legislate with these things, okay? And a lot of it is through making, incentives, disincentives, and but generally, I've said this before, where we basically have freedoms by default until the state, because the state has to justify why they're implementing certain things, right? It's a different approach, whereas America is sort of more prescriptive and I dare I say, probably limited in a different way, okay? Which is that it's like, the Second Amendment is one of those, right, examples. So everything has its weaknesses. But at the same time, I think when you're thinking about like things like these, I think that okay, let me get to my point, which is that, like, I think the Nikki Haley comment is a really good example of how you can get swept up into authoritarian ideas, being confused about who like your allies are. Okay, so you agree with them. So there are people who will name the same problem that you see. Okay, like for me, I go, okay, well, this warrants a discussion. So the people who say anonymity, no matter what, at all times, they're the same people who have never had to make a tech product that actually at scale that works. Okay, because obviously it's there's millions and millions of spam accounts every single day that are having to be taken down. Lots of like the volume of these things, right? It's an impossible task. And also with, anonymous accounts and propaganda wars. Like, again, those Russia and China. I love how they're like, yeah, Russia and China troll accounts. Yes. Again, your agencies you don't talk about. What about that PR firm that you hire to have bots and troll? It's like, isn't it funny? It's like, it's always Russia and China. It's China that did it. It's like, no, everyone's doing it. Okay. Including you. And it's like, well, you can't operate in that space and get like traction without using that model. It's a template that I've talked about. But so she might, her and I might have an alignment. So my mistake would be going, oh, well, I'm seeing this. Oh, I should vote for Nikki Haley. Do you know why? Because she agrees with me on this issue that internet anonymity is bad, and that everyone should have their real name, and that you would encourage more civic discourse. That's not the case, by the way. There's no research that backs any of this up. Okay, there is absolutely no research that shows that the online disinhibition effect and those other things are not that. Yes, anonymity may provide some cover for it, but it doesn't ultimately change because there's a whole bunch of people that are, pretty horrible under their real names, and they aren't terribly civil, right? There's a lot of people. Again, there's no data to back up what she's saying, right? That a lack of anonymity encourages civility. What a lack of anonymity does is it increases surveillance. Okay, so obviously, if you think we don't have a social score now, which we do, but if you think we don't have a social score now, and they already have the thing is they can already find out who you are for the most part. Thing is, if you are a target of government, okay, they can already find out who you are. Pretty much, right? You have to be pretty, like even with a VPN, they can subpoena you, right? They can subpoena the VPN company and get your details. Still, most of us, if you within the crosshairs of the authorities, then they'll probably know who you are anyway, and it's serious enough, right? It's more a matter of will, resources, and willingness, and the desire to do so. Most of them don't desire, right? So that's the first thing. But also, what was I going to say? I can't remember. I'm tired today, so what was I going to say? Can't remember. Oh yeah. So so you open the way for surveillance, right? So first of all, you get but also you create a chilling effect. So it's actually ultimately going to have the effect. Now, the thing is that there's case law in the US that's just on its face. It's not even going to get up. I mean, she's been laughed out of the place anyway. But what I find really interesting about this is that it's always framed in the context of American citizens. It's against Americans. It's like, well, that there's there's 7.5 billion other people affected by this, right? Because those companies are run and headquartered in the United States. It's not an America only thing. And I find it very concerning that even the most libertarian American people who are anti-censorship and stuff, they're still only focused on the First Amendment. They're not focused on the fact that it's fine outside of American shores. They still believe ultimately that it's okay to spy on me, right? It's still fine to spy on me and you if you're outside of the United States. That's still perfectly fine. That's Australia's problem, isn't it? Right. Exactly. And, you know, so my name can still end up on a list in the fucking thing because I'm foreign. And it's even worse if I try to live there, right? It's like, oh, fucking hell, you end up on a list pretty quick. But I find that very disturbing, how US-centric a lot of this stuff is. But also how people can find themselves supporting the worst politicians and the worst governments because they haven't thought through past the problem. And they go, well, I agree. I hate those people that are anonymous and yelling at me on the internet. Therefore, like, I agree with them. It's like the same thing with this gender critical shit, right? Hi, Isaac. The same thing with this like gender critical shit, where it's like, well, I agree on this one thing, and it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. And it's like, well, okay, you've got alignment on this one thing. So rad femmes. This happened, I've talked about this before, the Prohibition and the temperance movement, where rad femmes were co-opted by the far-right Christians in the United States around Prohibition. Their reasons for like wanting Prohibition were different, but the end result, the policy result was the same, which was, you know, an authoritarian policy. And it's like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, your intentions and reasons you got to think these things through. You got to think through why and what you're willing to trade off and stuff like this. This is the problem with single issue activism in general. Like even me as an internet rights person, obviously, I'm not going to sit there and support policies that are not going to solve the problem, right? I can agree, because I'm also wanting maximum rights and maximum democracy. And I say maximum because there's no such thing as absolutes with 8 billion people trying to coexist. You can't have a perfect direct democracy. And like I said at the beginning of the stream, I'm sorry if there's a lag. I can't help it. I'm just going to have to pull out the SLR and use a capture card, I think. Sorry, I'll fix that. That's annoying because it makes it a lot more annoying and convoluted system to set up. So I'm going to have to fucking rewire everything again. Bloody hell. What was I going to say? Yeah, but, you know, it's like, well, this is the thing where it's like think through the next steps of because you find yourself being led astray, and we see it a lot, where you think that these people are your allies and they're not. They're actually the opposite. They're actually going, this is what fascism is, by the way. It literally takes revolutionary energy and rage, and the rage that would come from, you know, this frustration at the economic system, which is what we're seeing now, okay? End stage capitalism creates these conditions where people are upset and they want revolution, they want change, and you have people who go, I agree with you, but my policy is the authoritarian one. And then they'll frame the democratic people who are trying to just, you know, sort of encourage positive behaviors and have a little bit of, you know, this is why this anti-establishment stuff is quite sinister. And this is why, you know, even though I find that the sort of accusations about Russell Brand and Jimmy Dore to be over the top, at the same time, it is precarious in that regard because that is like at the core of how fascism rises, which is that it takes your anger and it takes your issue and it takes your, your need for change, and it attaches it to a them and a they, a mysterious a faceless bureaucrat who's like, pulling levers and stuff, rather than a bunch of people trying to encourage people to do behaviors through policy and law. Like, that stuff's really hard to understand. It's complicated, it's boring, like I said, and it's like, well, okay. And then they frame that as authoritarian. Okay. And they did that during COVID with with Australia's like COVID policies. And it's like, well, no, a lot of it was actually just basic like choice architecture stuff, which is like trying to encourage people to get vaccinated. Giving incentives and rewards to promote public health behaviours that they want, knowing full well that a portion of the population are going to be children about things, okay? And that's what we saw happen. It's behavioural stuff. But the problem is that, so that's why I always find it quite concerning when they're sort of, this anti-establishment stuff. It can turn on its head very easily because, these government, the role of governing is very difficult, and you kind of need to encourage and herd cats, and you need to, like I said, a lot of policy work, a lot of government work is in making sure that people are safe, people are taken care of, especially the most vulnerable. Okay, and unfortunately, with capitalism, being the main engine and the base in which we operate things, we need to, like there's all these other what was I going to say? I don't know, my brain left. There is no role for no government, is what I'm saying. Okay, which is that it's just we have a complex society. You're not willing to do the work that it takes to run a society peacefully and negotiate. Trust me, if you've ever been to any fucking type of political meeting with this consensus decision-making process, you don't want to go. You want to outsource that shit. Someone else should do it. People don't want to do all the work that it takes. It's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to negotiate, to have, you get what I'm saying. So it's like let's use the young child thing. It's fucking exhausting having to explain every decision and everything and every little rule and every fucking part of the process to a 4-year-old who's pitching a fit, right? That's why you have to sometimes go a little authoritarian and say, because I said so. But sometimes you've got to use choice, because, there's ways to get what you want with a toddler. Like I said, I'm going to keep using that broccoli analogy, and that gives them the feeling of choice and the freedom within their ability of, within their ability and, to understand and that sort of stuff. But that's how you look at it, which is that, the government's not necessarily authoritarian by design. It's not necessarily, you can't run a complex society this way. But this is why when I'm talking about like the online censorship stuff, right? Not online censorship, sorry, anonymity. It's that even though I think that you should have incentives in place for people to show up, be pro-social rather than anti-social, use their real names. I think that there should be positive rewards and positive, for doing the right thing, okay? Punishment for doing the wrong thing doesn't work, okay? At a basic psychological level as well as at the societal level. Okay, you're always going to get that portion of, and also there's going to be people who think that rules are authoritarian across the board, and that's just stupid. It's like, yeah, I'm talking to a toddler. Okay, eat your fucking broccoli, calm down. Okay, but it's but you also from the tech product point of view, where it's gone awry is that a lot of this is where it's in conflict with capitalism, I suppose, and the content factory and all of those incentives, is that the incentives that have been put in place with social media are not pro-social. They encourage anonymous abuse. They encourage that kind of behavior. And so what it needs is a redesign, okay? And so this is what I've been on about when I'm talking about unethical design processes. I'm talking about changing and reframing the choice architecture and redesigning it in a way that encourages pro-social behaviors, okay, rather than ones that are antisocial. Now, the problem is that antisocial behaviors are endemic to media. So how do you get more civil conversations? You deal with the media. How do you get more civil conversations online? You feed people, make people secure, make people feel like they're being heard. Okay, a big part of the reason, and the literature will back me up on this, is that part of the reason why people lash out on social media is because they have no power otherwise. Okay, they're isolated, they're depressed, they're lonely, they are angry. Like a lot of the research into incels is that a lot of it comes down to the fact that there's nowhere else that they can feel any power. Okay, so what do? You don't take away their only power and make them worse off. What you do is you give them power in different ways and you encourage them. So it's like, like a toddler, you empower them to make better choices. And I do believe that if you encourage people to make better choices, they will, the majority of them, Not all, but the majority will rise to that challenge. You've got to give people the right conditions and the resources to make the right decisions, as I've said before. And so it's not, so again, be careful about these types of politicians who will exploit your concerns around things like an issue, like one issue, like internet anonymity, or, you know, like cancel culture, or whatever the fuck. Cancel culture is exactly that. How are you not advocating for cancel culture right now? If you want real names so you can build burn books of people, that is like literally cancel culture. That's literally what it is. Okay, so you got no credibility talking about any of it. Okay. But you know, you can't, like, you might be concerned about, but again, they'll say it's like the left. It's like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. Anyway, because they'd be using it to like out environmental activists as well. So I don't think the left is really, I don't think the left is who you're really chiefly considering. Anyway, yes, that all-powerful left. You know, you basically, with that, you're giving corporate HR all the power, more power than they've already got, which is too much. That people who are that stupid, marketers, corporate marketing departments and corporate HR, are the dumbest people on the fucking planet. They've got way too much power in line with their level of intelligence. Trust me. You don't want them to have more power. Unless you're an authoritarian or a fascist and you want fucking desk murderers to just uncritically implement whatever the fuck bullshit you want because you wrap it in an "Are you okay" campaign and a cupcake. It's like, no, get fucked. No. Okay, I don't know what I just said then, but it's like, well, okay, so be careful about this stuff. Like, it's like, my first reaction was, oh, well, this is fucking embarrassing. She's saying what I said. But then I was like, well, no, because it's not the case, because I'm advocating for different solutions. I'm advocating for redesigning. So, but again, of course, redesigning social media and having an algorithm is authoritarian big tech conspiracy theory, because this mysterious they in the sky wants to control you. Why? You're not that important. There's an it's so self-centered to think that anyone cares about what you're doing. They don't. No one cares. I have been fucked by the algorithms, but it's not from anything it's not because I'm special. Okay, if anything, it's because I'm not special and I just happen to have landed on a fucking landmine and I've fallen through the cracks. It's because I'm not special that I'm in this position. If I was special, it'd have been fixed. I'd have had the ability to get it fixed. But this idea that like somehow the government gives a fuck about like anything that at scale, it's like, yeah, I'm not saying I support surveillance, but at the same time, you know, like, no one's paying attention. Like I said, it's only if you're in the crosshairs that it becomes an issue. But, you know, most people aren't in the crosshairs of government. I know you like to think you're the center of the universe, but you're really not that interesting to most people, right? I'm not that interesting. Okay, I don't consider myself worthy of being picked on by the government. I'm not that fucking interesting, right? You know, like it's but that, you know, that's like a conspiracy. It's like who's spying on you? Who specifically? Okay, it's like, and again, I'm not saying that you know, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about, kind of stuff. Because again, you know, obviously these things are more complicated than that. But you know, it's like, well, people, you can actually just design products in a way, this isn't difficult. You can just design products in a way that incentivize the behaviors that you want. Okay, that's what user experience design, or you know, these types of experience design is, which is basically going, okay, well, what outcome do we want? We don't want to, you know, we don't want to infringe. See, the problem is that it's become a top-down corporate approach where it's like, well, no, this is okay. I talked about talked about dark patterns with the last stream. Where things cross over from white hat and to black hat is generally that it's not manipulating the user, right? So there is a difference between persuasion and manipulation, and that area is quite grey, and that's where black hat versus white hat, and dark patterns versus fairly innocuous design decisions. They come down to your intent and how much autonomy and freedom and choice the actual user has, right? So if you create something where the user can't opt out, that would be considered, a black hat, right? It's a dark design. It's like whatever. If you're giving them complete choice and you want them to have consent and fully consent to opting into what you've got to offer, then there's no problem with that. Okay. And obviously, like you can, create a setting and create the optimal conditions where they will make decisions, that you want them to make. But again, a lot of it comes down to how much consent there is, how much autonomy the user has, how much, you are manipulating and narrowing the number of choices available to somebody, whether you are trapping them into what you want them to do versus, persuading them to do that. Okay. So like the difference between a dictatorship and a democracy, even if it's a flawed democracy, is that you still can go to the ballot box and still choose, and they still have to persuade. If you're not persuading and you are actually doing it under coercion, it's not a democracy. Okay, so this idea that like people that not voting Democrat or not voting for the party that you want is anti-democratic is not. It's like, well, the people that are purporting to save democracy whilst shutting people out of their own primary race and like limiting your choices to who you can vote for, then that's not a democracy, because people by definition, democracy means that people have autonomy and choice, and that it's on you to persuade them to make a free and open choice. But you get what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying. So these things overlap, and a lot of it is like through that sort of lens of choice architecture. I know I've kind of waffled again. I'm not going to stick around very long because I need to. I've got lots to do today, but I just wanted to sort of. I felt the need to stream on the internet anonymity thing because that's not the answer. This stuff is not the answer. Mandating it, and also because we're in a regulatory environment right now with these sort of online safety bills and these all these things that we've talked about, right? I think you've got to zoom out and think about like how much choice you have in the matter. You are free when you have choice. I'm not saying, but not to the extent where all rules or having all of the choices available to you is the optimal freedom for everybody, right? Maximum choice, maximum democracy, maximum freedoms. Okay, you want to maximize people's freedoms and orient them in the direction that is good for them. And in an ideal setting, the things that would be considered good for people, okay, is based on research and data and stats and all that sort of stuff. And for the most part, it is, okay. Now, can corruption fuck that up? Yes, of course. Coles and Woolworths, the big supermarkets chains here compete in like name only. They're ultimately a cartel and they collude on pricing, right? And, that's really in name only, okay? It's the same thing with, renting, like I talked about before. You don't have a choice. It's not like you can turn around and exercise your rights because we don't actually have the freedom. They go, well, you can just move out. Well, you can't. Well, why don't you buy? We can't. Because it's not set up in a way that we can actually get out of the situation that we're in. So that's not a democracy, and it's not real choice. It's an artificial choice. Okay, that is the illusion of choice, and that's why rational choice theory. Anyway, it's a whole other thing. But it's just there's, obviously complicating factors there, but for the most part, I think you're thinking correctly about solutions if you're thinking about solutions at all, but the best solution is one where you are constantly trying to, you can't just go, well, freedom. Okay, that's a child's view. You can't just be free to do whatever the fuck you want and be left alone. That's childish. Okay, that doesn't fix anything. It doesn't, and it ignores the problem. Okay, what it does is, but if you are maximizing that freedom as much as possible, you are on the right track. It's a matter of like principle. You're always pushing towards freedom, twirling towards freedom. And I mean real freedom. So like I said, maximum amount of choice. This is what free market economics is basically. Maximum amount of choice, people competing freely and fairly in an even playing field. The marketplace of ideas. Okay, we don't live in that space at the moment. That should be where you're oriented. Okay, or here's what we think. Here's what we say is happening. Okay, all right. So it's top down. This is the rules, and if you abide by it, if you don't abide by it, you'll be punished, right? That's not a just because it's something that you think is freedom is not freedom. That's a distorted version of distorted idea of liberalism and freedom that is the cult version. Okay, this is the cult's version of freedom, where it's redefined the words. It's detached from its meaning, it's hijacking your emotions and fears, and it's calling anyone who disagrees with it the bad guy, when really the people who are doing a lot of the policy work and trying to come up with the solutions actually are just living in reality and understanding that, we live in a complex society where 8 billion people have to coexist, not just America, but everywhere. All lives matter, so to speak, okay, whether across the world, okay, it's not just America and America's interests in charge at all times, but other people matter too, and other people's freedoms matter too. And I would argue that many countries have a lot more freedom than America, because America has basically narrowed the field of choice to this level, and that's not free, okay? But I'm just right. So it's like, well, okay, how do we solve this problem? Because we've got an effectively a dictatorship right now in the United States. Okay, military dictatorship running the show of the United States. Right, I'm not the only person to say that it's a military dictatorship. Okay, one of the leading scholars in fascism says the same thing. America's turning fascistic, and it has been for some time. But the rest of the world, how do we protect ourselves from this stuff? Okay, so it's like, okay, well, they're going to put us all on their fucking list. All right, well, because we're foreigners. They only care about foreign fucking influence for their bullshit. I don't know what kind of democracy they think they're fucking protecting, but anyway. But, even though we technically don't have the constitutional right to privacy, I would say that we're kind of working through that, legislatively, and we're kind of working through that process at the moment, and we are oriented in that direction where it's, we work towards maximizing rights through regulation and policy and, choice architecture approach, rather than just this top down, this is the law. If you don't obey the law, you get shot. Okay, my way or the highway fucking shit. That's not democracy. Democracy is my being able to say, no, you can't do that. And I want a different choice, please. I would like different options. Okay, I don't want what you're offering. What are the other options available to me that I'm comfortable with? That's democratic. Okay, none of the above. Okay. If there are people who have problems with none of the above, or complexity, or I don't know, then they're probably inherently authoritarian, and you should be very wary of them. Okay, but again, this is just one of those examples that touches me, which is something that I've been talking about. I know I've repeated myself, but where I don't know whether anonymity works from a product level, but you can't enforce it. What you can do is incentivize it. Okay, so reward people who do the right thing. Don't punish people who don't. Okay, because you need to allow for anonymity, but you also need to have a process in place where when mistakes happen, there needs to be some sort of process in place. Tech companies will not invest in the manpower that it takes to manually review this stuff or do this stuff like the right way. Okay, every user should be able to pick up the phone and access their, correct their record and correct any misunderstandings. It should be their right to do so. It should be their right, which, it is, you do have a right to amend, but at the moment, like we had that, you still don't have any power, right? They can just say what they like and put it and go, yep, okay. You have the right to delete whatever you want and correct your record, the right to amend, but try telling that to your real estate agent who can kick you out of your house in retaliation. Right? Yeah, technically you can go to the tribunal, but where are you going to go? Where are you going to move? You got to live somewhere. What are you going to do? It costs you $15,000 every time you want to move house because you've got movers and bond and, all of the cleaning and all of the things that go with it. And, it's like, well, is that a real choice? It's not a real choice. Okay, that's not democracy. That's not, you can have rights on paper, but, don't have, in this corporatocracy that we live in, okay, it's, it's not, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to go. I've got shit to do. And yeah, so, I hope you're well and I'll be back next week. I know I've rambled a bit, but it's all good. It was good to see you all. And, but I just wanted to say that, really start to get your guard up and really, because people are really showing who they are right now. And don't just take things on face value because someone agrees with you on paper about a problem. Everyone agrees on the problem. Not many people, once you start talking about the solutions, people will start to show you who they are, and it's okay to back away. It's okay to go, you know what? I misread this. You're a fascist and you're falling into fascism. And while I agree with you on this thing, I'm sorry, but I'm very concerned about you in these other respects. And if they won't listen, then you don't have to stay connected. You're not obligated. If you are free, you are not obligated. You are not forced. If you are free, you are able to walk away. Okay? If it's a real friendship, you can disagree. If it is a real allyship, you can disagree. If it is a real good faith wanting to solve a problem, then they will be open to every solution to the problem, not just their solution. Okay, that should be putting your shackles up with this. If people are dictating what the answers are and they're not listening to you, or they're only talking about a problem and concealing what they think the solution is, or they're shutting down any then they're not a good faith actor and they should not be trusted. Okay. And I think that it's like, if you don't have, this is like, you don't have a democracy if you don't have choice. You don't have freedom if you don't have the freedom to walk away from things. Okay. You don't have freedom of religion if you don't have freedom from religion. Okay. You don't, it's like these things are, you don't have, you get what I'm saying, right? You don't have freedom of speech just for yourself. It's freedom of speech for everybody, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of that's democracy. And anyone who tries to frame democracy as this, overly architected, and again, I'm saying you need some architecture because I said you want to promote certain behaviors, right? But this overly narrow, limited box of what acceptable thought is not democratic, okay? It is a dictatorship, okay, with very narrow letterbox authoritarian choice architecture that narrows you and squeezes you to the point where you have only just enough choice that you don't fucking go ballistic and start having a revolution, okay? You have a real democracy. You aren't restricted in your choices too much, okay? Obviously, we promote better behavior. You promote good decisions, you promote, healthy decisions, you promote pro-social behaviors, you obviously, punish violence, but you always give, punish sort of, deviation, but at the same time, you always give people a path to make better choices. Always give people the chance to make better choices. That's what a democracy is. And if anybody is talking about punishment or, dictating like what your choices are or limiting your choices, whether it's government, whether it is broccoli, whether it is fucking anything, okay? How you eat. At the end of the day, I would hope that people would behave certain ways because it's in their interest to do so. But people are more complicated than that, right? People, you get what I'm saying, right? But I'm saying you want to encourage good behavior and encourage pro-social behavior, and you want to always give people plenty of space to make the good decisions and the resources to do so. Obviously, people who are desperate and, economically struggling and all those things, you make worse decisions when you're under stress, right? That's known in science. It's just, that's backed by research. It's a fundamental part of human psychology is that under stress we make bad decisions, a hot, cold empathy gap, that kind of stuff, right? But for the most part, we should be designing society in a way that maximizes liberty, that maximizes people's choices, that gives them the resources that they need to make better decisions, not censor, silence, suppress, punish, limit choices, and punish. That is something that is inherently not democratic. Okay. And there is a vast difference between calling something democracy and you only having 3 choices and all of them shit. Like I said, you might be able to choose what flavor of lube you're being fucked with, but you're still being, what about not being fucked? Is that a choice? If not being fucked is not a choice, then that's not a choice. Okay? And it's the same thing across the board. And so I'm sorry, but if you are thinking about democracy and what a liberal democracy looks like and what choices are and what there's no freedom there. That's not choice. That is authoritarianism, okay? But also don't get fucking libertarian brainworms where you think that, because your choices are between mango and broccoli and, an ass fucking and a blowjob and lots of different things, that any kind of attempt to persuade you to make better choices, whether that, using policy instruments is authoritarian, then that's fucking stupid and you're a toddler and you need parenting, right? People, it's like, okay, well, that's a balance. And you're not always going to get these things correct. You're not always going to get it right. But it's like, okay, so let's just have some slightly more mature thinking and don't trust people who are saying, just because they're saying the same thing, naming the same problem that you perceive as well, because there's a whole range of solutions under one problem. And there's a lot of people who are extremely dangerous right now. Nikki Haley's one of them. But Ron DeSantis, again, it's like, well, I agree. Oh, look, I'm not suddenly going to go, wow, Ron DeSantis is defending democracy. Vivek, or whatever his name is defending fucking, it's like, that's not true either. Okay? It's like, well, look at what kind of, they're still limiting your choices. It's just within a fucking very narrow window of quibbles, right? So I'm just saying, be on guard about these things. And just remember, just think, well, have I got maximum choice of all the options that are best for me? Okay? Do I have a wide range of healthy foods available and the occasional, junk food? But, obviously also I would like to not have poison on supermarket shelves. So, it's not authoritarian. That's just common sense because some people really just are too stupid to not eat poison. Okay. All right. Well, maybe I can accept that level of choice, but I do want to eat potato chips once in a while. Just, I prefer them to not be laced with nicotine and cocaine. That, that's, but do we have a wider range of healthy options? Okay. That's the kind of goal that you want. That's what democracy is. Okay. It's like fucking hell. So yeah, anyway, hopefully I've been of value. I'm always of more value than I think, and less than I want to be, more than I think. But it's good to see you all, and I'll be back next week. I got to go. I need to piss. I'm fucking busting for a piss. Okay, take care. Become a patron if you like. All those things. Tell me you love me. Share me. All that sort of stuff. Sorry, Isaac, I haven't replied, but I will. Let me answer it now. On the word idolatry, I misspoke, and I thought to correct it, but I didn't, and I meant aesthetics. I was wrong. So that to answer your question, I said idolatry when I meant aesthetics, because I had my brain in fascism land, and idolatry and aesthetics are sort of intertwined in theory of fascism. But yeah, I actually just wrote the wrong word. I malapropped. But yeah, I will. The other stuff, like it's yeah, it's like I said, you can align with people on the problem and consider their worldview and intentions and solutions to be dangerous. And that's where people get caught up. Okay, which is that I can agree on the problem and not support support the way they go about the thing, or the solutions that they've got on the table, or anything else. Okay, and just because you agree on the problem doesn't necessarily mean you support that person. They're not an ally just because you agree on the problem. You're an ally if you agree on the solution. So that's really the anyway. So take care. I love you. Have a great weekend. I gotta go piss. All right. I love you. Bye.
Thank you.